The Fat Controller's engines love their work. Gordon likes pulling the express. Thomas likes his branch line. And Percy likes taking the mail. But none of them likes being a middle engine. It's no fun being stuck in the middle. Donald and Douglas are Scottish twin engines. They're practical, peppery and proud. They nearly always work together.
But sometimes they prefer to work separate from each other.
One day, Donald and Douglas were chuffing through the countryside, hauling a heavy load. Down the line, Trevor the traction engine had been struggling with a big cartload of hay. Crossing the tracks, the cart's wheels had broken off. Then Trevor heard a whistle. "Oh no!" Trevor cried. Donald could see the cart. "Stop!" he cried. Donald's driver applied the brakes, but it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt.
But Donald and Douglas were cross with each other.
"Stop being pushy," Donald snapped. "Don't call me pushy," Douglas snapped back. "You shouldn't have pushed me into the cart," huffed Donald. "You pulled me, you mean," argued Douglas. "Didn't he?" Did, no. Did too." Before long, the track was cleared and Donald and Douglas were on their way. But the twins were so cross, they refused to speak to each other for the rest of the day. The next day, Percy was cheerfully collecting coal trucks from the smelter yard where Harry and Bert worked. They liked to play tricks on steam engines. Percy didn't want to fall for their tricks again. But before he knew it, he was stuck in the middle. "Oh, bother!" chuffed Percy crossly. "Little green piggy in the middle," Harry teased. Percy's driver was cross. With trucks in front of him and trucks behind, Percy had to go slowly. James was in the yard when Percy steamed slowly by. "It's Slow Coach Percy," James laughed. "You wouldn't be laughing if you were stuck in the middle." Percy fumed, and he fumed all the way to the coaling plant. Lacey, the Fat Controller, needed an engine to help Duck at the smelter's yard.
Percy is busy at the coal yards, he explained, so I need an engine to help while he's away.
"May I go, sir?" said Donald eagerly. "I only need one engine," said the Fat Controller, "not two." "I am only one engine, sir," said Donald, "and I would like to work with Duck." The Fat Controller was surprised, but agreed. Thomas was worried. "Won't you miss one another?" he asked. "I know I'd miss Annie and Clarabelle." "I'll work better on my own," sniffed Douglas. "I have work to do," huffed Donald. At first, Donald enjoyed working with Duck. Then, things started to go wrong. "Did you shunt those trucks onto the other line?" Donald asked. "You said you wanted them on the other line," Duck replied. "No, that other line. The other line." Donald was cross. "Douglas would have known what I meant," he huffed. Douglas was working on his own. He chuffed dutifully through the beautiful countryside. But Douglas had no one to share it with. Although he tried not to, he was beginning to miss his twin. One by one, Percy shunted his trucks onto the tipper's loading ramp. The coal was unloaded. Percy was not allowed to cross the loading ramp until the tipper had been turned off. It was against the rules. But as soon as his driver and fireman left, there was trouble. Henry arrived to pick up coal. He bumped into the trucks and the trucks bumped into Percy. Percy was pushed onto the loading ramp. "Help!" cried Percy. "I'm not a truck!" But no one heard him. Percy was hoisted up. tipped over and brought back down again. After Percy was lowered back onto the ground, the manager was very cross. "You have caused confusion and delay," he said. "I'll have to report this to the Fat Controller." That night, Douglas's driver took him to visit Donald. "I was just passing," said Douglas. "Have you come to say you're sorry?" Donald sniffed. This made Douglas very cross. "I've nothing to be sorry for," he said, and steamed away in a huff. Later, the Fat Controller spoke severely to Percy. "I'm very disappointed in you, Percy," he said. "You know it's against the rules to go on the tipper's loading ramp." "Sorry, sir," Percy said sadly, "but it wasn't my fault. It's because those diesels made me a middle engine." "Nevertheless, you will shunt trucks in the yard until I can get to the bottom of this." "Pa," said James, thinking no one could hear, "I could handle those diesels with bent buffers and a busted boiler." "Then you will do Percy's run to the smelter." "Yes, sir," said James. The next day, Donald was in a bad mood. Duck could see he was getting too close to the buffers. "Look out!" he shouted, but it was too late. Donald's driver was very cross. "This wouldn't have happened if you were working with Douglas," he said. Donald knew he was right, and Duck knew he couldn't pull Donald back onto the rails. So he went for help. James arrived at the smelter. He was determined not to be tricked by Harry and Bert. "Hello, James," oozed Harry. "Can't I learn a thing or two from those who know?" "Just get my trucks ready and stay out of my way," puffed James importantly. "Yes, sir," Bert chimed greasily. Douglas was sadly finishing his work as Duck steamed into the depot. "Donald's in trouble," said Duck. "Donald in trouble!" Douglas cried. "I'm on my way!" And he steamed off as fast as he could. Douglas struggled and struggled. He finally pulled his twin gently back onto the tracks. He was relieved Donald wasn't hurt. "Thank you," Donald said, "and I'm sorry." "No, I'm sorry," said Douglas. "I'm sorry," insisted Donald. "You don't have to have a row about who's sorry," chuckled Duck. "Just be glad you're back together." And they were. James cheerfully backed up to his trucks. He was certain he had fooled Harry and Bert, but he was wrong. "Little red piggy in the middle," chortled Harry. "Just like Percy," jeered Bert. "I am not like Percy," huffed James. "I am not a middle engine, and I'm not moving." And he didn't. When the Fat Controller heard the news, he sent Percy to fetch James. This made Percy happy. He buffered up to James and took him along with all the trucks to the docks. "Right on time," said the manager. "But what is that big red engine doing in the middle?" "Learning," Percy replied. "Learning what?" "Learning to be a middle engine." James covered himself in steam, hoping no one would recognize him, but it was no good. There is only one big red engine on the island, and everyone knows his name is James.